Alright, I'll be the first to admit that I was biased in my previous video on FPS games. I tried not to be, and I tried to do my research, but it's clear that I was more biased towards Overwatch than I should have been. People were more than happy to point that out to me. I pride myself in being able to admit when I'm wrong, and wrong I was. After more research, and a large number of additional hours spent on Paladins, and several discussions with various commenters, here's Paladins, a more proper objective take. You definitely need to watch my original video first, as this video will mostly be drawing upon points from that video and clarifying what I was wrong about. Let's dive in. Paladins, Champions of the Realm began development before Overwatch was announced, leaving Hi-Rez Studios in an uncomfortable position. They had been basing their game off another FPS of theirs, Global Agenda, which they made 10 years ago, and which had many features that were similar to those later used in Overwatch. So here was this game, codenamed Chaos, that they had been working on and were excited for. And now along comes another game made by a major production company that was remarkably similar to their own. What direction were they to take? Keep going along the same route or change course altogether? By Hi-Rez's count several months ago at least, about 42 abilities are notably similar between the two games, but 36 of those came from Global Agenda, not from Overwatch. The other 6 they do admit appeared in Overwatch before Paladins. Assuming that this is correct, or at least was correct several months ago, it's clear to see that Hi-Rez did not copy most things from Overwatch directly, and I never meant to imply that they did. A better comparison to what likely happened was that each game started in a similar place, and moved in similar directions, as was simply natural for each to do, leaving both in a similar end location. Hi-Rez didn't look at Overwatch and think, hey, let's do that, but instead they looked at Overwatch and thought, oh dang, we were already doing that. Now what? In fact, many of the comparisons I made between the classes of Paladins and Overwatch were unfair to Paladins. I stand by my gripes between some of the similarities, between characters such as Drogoz and Pharah, and Victor and Soldier for example, but plenty of things that I said were true to a much lesser degree, and were clearly clouded by opinion. Take Barik and Torbjorn for example. A dwarvish inventor is ridiculously generic, and past that visual similarity, they actually function pretty differently. Their turrets are nothing alike, and Barik is actually classified as a frontline, while Torbjorn is anything but. Bomb King and Junkrat are both natural evolutions of the Demo Man, and it's unlikely one drew inspiration from another. While Makoa and Roadhog are similar in physique, you can chalk that up to them both being tanks, and past their hook, the two characters are nothing alike. Ruckus was actually playable before D.Va was even revealed, so you can't accuse him of copying her, and the other way around might even be true to a degree. I also neglected to mention Eevee, whose Ice Block ability was present in Paladins before Maze was in Overwatch. And Fernando, for all his faults, actually plays pretty differently than Reinhardt despite what you'd expect. Their actual personalities are also nothing alike. And while it's true that abilities like Androxus' Reversal and Genji's Deflect may seem similar, they actually aren't the same, contrary to what I initially thought. Sure, they both deflect damage, but Genji deflects it as it comes, while Androxus absorbs it all and sends it back in one large burst. Makoa and Genji's ultimates look identical, but have different applications when actually playing. Several things in Paladins, like the play of the game system, were in fact taken from Overwatch, as were kill cams and the certain use of terms, such as elimination, but all of this is openly admitted by Hi-Rez. I just wish that they could have perhaps thought of a slightly different way to implement certain things, but I do respect them for not trying to hide that direct inspiration. And oh boy, new things have been added since my last video. 3 new champions have been thrown into the mix: Torvald, Maeve, and literally as I was writing this script, Inara. Torvald seems like a pretty unique design in general. I especially like his whole mechanic with absorbing shields. Maeve, on the other hand, seems like she drew a lot of inspiration from Genji in her ability set. I say this not as a bad thing, however. I actually enjoy playing her much more than I enjoy playing Genji, and she fits into Paladins rather well. Inara also seems pretty unique, excepting her wall, which is very similar to Mei's wall, but it's just a wall. It's nothing super special. However, maybe it's just because she's new and people haven't learned how to play her yet, but Inara doesn't seem very powerful, and she doesn't seem very exciting to play. I don't know, that's just an opinion, but she's a weird one. Anyway, a new mode was added, which is the same as Elimination in Overwatch, but with full 5v5 teams instead of 3v3. And another huge thing that sent many Paladins players into a tizzy was the addition of legendary cards. Now, in addition to the card loadouts each character has, they can choose from one of 3 legendary cards, which provide an overarching passive buff for the entirety of a match. The system itself isn't bad, but it seems to me like many champions have one card that will almost always be the best, and that card usually isn't the default unlocked card. This isn't bad for most players, as they can just unlock the card, but newer players might have a hard time catching up enough to purchase these cards, which cost 12,000 of a new currency called Essence. For reference, a common card costs 500, a rare 1250, and an epic 5,000. On Reddit at least, some Paladins players were seen switching over to Overwatch, as they were upset with this new system which theoretically changes Paladins from free-to-play to pay-to-win. Back to talking about my video though. One of the most problematic portions of my video was a section on the lack of polish in Paladins. I personally stand by that Paladins lacks polish to a great degree and is less enjoyable because of it. In fact, the more and more I play, the more and more glitches and broken things I find. But much of what I said in that section went past the point of bugginess and just went to being opinions. My thoughts on the music mostly pertain to how sometimes it seems slow in relation to the fast gameplay, while my thoughts on the maps are opinion entirely. While Paladins has plenty of glitches, as I just said, the fact that it's still in beta excuses it to a degree, and one can't pretend that Overwatch doesn't have its fair share of glitches as well. Though I said the characters in Paladins are boring, after playing a lot more, they actually seem a lot more interesting. Except Sha Lin. Screw Sha Lin. That arrow spam ability, oh my god, it's so dumb! But that's besides the point. Characters are actually pretty enjoyable, and become much more so when you unlock their voice packs. It irks me to no end that you even need to unlock their voice pack in the first place, but again, that's besides the point. I still think that the hotkey system is a bit overcomplicated, however. I had one person try to tell me that it throws more skill into the mix, as you need to learn the key combinations, but to be frank, that's a bit ridiculous. You can't chalk up difficult communication to adding to skill requirements. A simple voice chat system would do wonders to help alleviate some of the issues. But the system does work for what it is. And my criticism on too many dash abilities? While I personally believe it to be true, it can definitely be argued that each dash works differently enough and has different enough applications on different characters that it actually provides for better gameplay, not worse. My point on lore was admittedly a weak one, as Hi-Rez has stated that lore is not a priority to them, but lore is something that I very much care about, so it's still a point that I feel should be made. Lastly, there's one huge thing I'd like to clear up. Many commenters seem to get the impression that I dislike or straight up hate Paladins, which lends itself to my bias, and this couldn't be further from the truth. Despite my criticisms of the game, it's a very fun game. I actually said that Overwatch is a better alternative, but I meant that in terms of production value and polish, not as games in general. As games, both are on equal footing. There are enough differences to set them apart, and both are incredibly enjoyable. While I personally prefer Overwatch and play it more, I still play Paladins regularly and find myself enjoying it more and more as time goes on. As a quick final point here, while most of the gripes people had with my videos were on the Paladin section, there were a few TF2 things I need to clear up. While I said there isn't a serious competitive mode, I was correct when referring to the built-in mode, because there is a competitive mode, but, I mean, to be frank, people don't take it very seriously. But tournaments held by players and organizations occur regularly, and those get quite serious, and have more of an alive scene than the built-in mode has. While there's an astounding lack of team play in casual games, team play is potentially even stronger in these tournaments than in Paladins and Overwatch, as more players means tighter teamwork is necessary in order to secure victory. My point on TF2's lore was mostly talking about what can be found in-game, because there's actually very good comics released by Valve that are canonical to the game, so it's not like lore is non-existent like I seem to have implied. Alright, so this video wasn't nearly as long as the last one, thankfully. I mean, 20 minutes, jeez, that was crazy long. But I hoped I accomplished my goal with this video, which was to make some points for Paladins in a less biased way, and to clarify both some facts and some of my opinions about the game. If you disagree with anything I said, or if there's anything I got wrong before that I still forgot to mention, please leave a comment and let me know. Thank you very much for watching.
2 to the 1, from the 1 to the 3. What's up? This is Jeff from the Overwatch team, making changes that you wouldn't believe gonna take you out with a long-range beam. 3 to the 1, from the 1 to the 3. Don't want you to be frustrated with me, but you know, it will be interesting to see your reaction when we nerf McCree.